Why does it feel like nothing is happening? You're praying, believing, trusting, and yet everything in your life seems to be on pause. But what if the moments when you see nothing happening are actually the moments when God is doing His deepest work? God is building your spiritual muscles through resistance. When Pharaoh finally released the Israelites from Egypt, they were free but weak. 400 years of slavery had conditioned them to depend on masters, not on God. So when God led them out, Exodus 13:17-18 tells us He made a deliberate choice. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. The shorter route would have saved them weeks, but it would have put them face to face with Philistine armies before they were ready. So God took them the long way through the desert. And in that desert, every day of delay was building strength. Every complaint they worked through was developing character. Every shortage of water that forced them to cry out to God was building their faith muscle. The journey looked like punishment, but it was preparation. When they finally entered Canaan 40 years later, they weren't the same people who left Egypt. The resistance had transformed them from slaves into warriors. That's what Romans 5:3-4 is talking about when it says, "We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." The suffering isn't the destination, it's the training ground. Every obstacle you're pushing against right now is building spiritual muscle you'll need for where God is taking you. That financial struggle is developing your faith. That closed door is strengthening your patience. The resistance isn't blocking you, it's building you. God is rewiring your thought patterns. Joseph had dreams of greatness when he was 17. He saw himself ruling, leading, being honored. But he also had an arrogance problem. He was his father's favorite, and he made sure his brothers knew it. He flaunted his special coat. He shared his dreams in ways that made them hate him. If God had elevated Joseph in that state, the power would have destroyed him. His thinking was all wrong. He thought he was special because of his position, not because of his character. So God allowed the pit, then slavery, then false accusation, then prison. For 13 years, everything Joseph thought defined him was stripped away. He wasn't favored anymore. He was forgotten. He wasn't special. He was a slave with a number. He wasn't destined for a throne. He was rotting in a dungeon. And in that darkness, God was rewiring his mind. Romans 12:2 calls it transformation, metamorpho, like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But inside the cocoon, complete restructuring is taking place. When Joseph finally stood before Pharaoh, Genesis 41:16 shows us the transformation. I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. That's not the arrogant teenager who went into prison. That's a man whose thinking has been completely rewired. He doesn't take credit. He doesn't boast. He doesn't leverage the moment for personal gain. The years in prison had dissolved his pride and rebuilt humility. The isolation had transformed his perspective from "I'm special" to "God is sovereign." Behind the scenes right now, God is doing the same work in you. 2 Corinthians 10:5 describes the battle. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Every time you choose to reject a lie and declare truth, you're allowing the rewiring. Every time you catch a negative thought and replace it with God's word, you're participating in the transformation. You can't see it happening, but your mind is being restructured for the future God has planned. God is pruning dead branches. David was just a shepherd boy when Samuel poured oil on his head and declared him Israel's next king. In that moment, everything should have changed. But it didn't. Saul was still king. David went back to the fields. And for years, maybe a decade or more, nothing visible happened. But behind the scenes, God was pruning David's life with surgical precision. John 15:2 explains the process. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. David was bearing fruit. He'd killed a giant, won battles, earned people's love. But God wanted even more fruit, so he pruned. David's reputation was cut away. Saul accused him of treason, turned the nation against him. His security was removed. He went from living in the palace to hiding in caves. His support system was pruned. His own wife despised him. His men almost stoned him. His closest friends questioned him. From David's perspective, it looked like everything was falling apart. He'd been anointed king, so why was he running for his life? Why was everything being taken from him? But God was making room. Every relationship God removed was one that would have competed for David's allegiance when he became king. Every comfort God stripped away was forcing David to depend on him instead of circumstances. Every loss was actually pruning for greater fruitfulness. Hebrews 12:11 acknowledges the pain. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. David couldn't see the harvest during the pruning, but when he finally became king, he ruled with a heart after God. The pruning had worked. That friendship that ended in your life, that job you lost, that opportunity that closed, God isn't taking things from you. He's pruning branches that would have limited the fruit you're meant to produce. What God is training your discernment. Elijah had just experienced one of the greatest victories in biblical history. On Mount Carmel, he called down fire from heaven, defeated 450 prophets of Baal, and watched God send rain after 3 years of drought. He was on a spiritual high. But then Jezebel sent a death threat, and Elijah ran. He ended up in a cave, depressed and ready to die. That's when God showed up for training. 1 Kings 19:11-12 records what happened. A great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord wasn't in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake. But the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. God was teaching Elijah something crucial about discernment. His voice isn't always in the dramatic. Elijah had just seen fire fall from heaven. He'd experienced the spectacular. But God wanted him to learn to recognize his voice in the whisper too. Because the rest of Elijah's ministry wouldn't always be Mount Carmel moments. There would be quiet seasons, confusing seasons, seasons where God's voice came softly. And Elijah needed to develop the discernment to hear it. Centuries later, a young boy named Samuel was sleeping in the temple when he heard a voice calling his name. 1 Samuel 3 tells us Samuel didn't recognize it. 3 times God called. 3 times Samuel ran to Eli thinking the old priest had called him. Finally, Eli realized what was happening and taught Samuel how to respond. "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." That night of confusion was Samuel's training. God was developing his ability to recognize divine communication. And that skill became crucial because Samuel grew up to be a prophet who heard from God clearly enough to anoint kings and guide a nation. Behind the scenes right now, God is training your spiritual senses. Hebrews 5:14 explains it. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. By constant use. Through practice. Your confusion about whether that door should open is training. Your uncertainty about that relationship is developing your discernment. Your struggle to hear God clearly is actually the process of learning to recognize His voice. One day soon, you will face a critical decision, and you'll just know what to do. That knowing will be the fruit of the training happening right now. God is establishing your foundation. When Moses killed the Egyptian and fled to Midian, he probably thought his chance to deliver Israel was over. He'd tried in his own strength and failed. Now he was a fugitive, a shepherd in the wilderness, forgotten by everyone. For 40 years, Moses tended sheep in obscurity. No miracles, no ministry, no visible purpose. Just sheep and silence. But God was building a foundation. Matthew 7:24-27 teaches that the wise man builds his house on rock, not sand. And foundation work happens underground. It's not glamorous, it's not visible, it's not exciting. But without it, everything collapses when the storm comes. Moses needed 40 years of foundation work because he was going to lead 2 million people through a desert. He needed humility to replace his arrogance. He needed patience to deal with constant complaints. He needed dependence on God instead of confidence in himself. When God finally appeared in the burning bush, Moses was ready. Not because he was qualified. Exodus 3:11 records him saying, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" That's not the same Moses who 40 years earlier had taken matters into his own hands. The wilderness had rebuilt his foundation from pride to humility, from self-reliance to God-dependence. And that foundation held. When he stood before Pharaoh, when he led Israel through the Red Sea, when he climbed Mount Sinai, his foundation didn't crack because it had been properly established. Paul experienced the same thing. After his Damascus Road encounter, he didn't immediately start preaching to the world. Acts 9:22-25 shows he preached in Damascus, then had to escape. Galatians 1:17 tells us he went to Arabia. Then he spent years being mentored by the apostles. Why all that preparation? Foundation work. God was establishing doctrine, character, and spiritual depth that could withstand persecution, church conflict, and spiritual warfare. Isaiah 28:16 promises, "See, I lay a stone in Zion, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone for a sure foundation. The one who relies on it will never be stricken with panic." Behind the scenes right now, God is going deep in you so He can eventually build high through you. Your waiting season is foundation work, and when God finally promotes you, that foundation will hold because it was established correctly. God is testing what He plans to trust you with. Abraham had waited 25 years for Isaac. A quarter century of praying, believing, watching Sarah's body age past childbearing. When Isaac finally arrived, he was more than a son. He was the promise made flesh. Everything God had said about Abraham's legacy depended on this boy. And then Genesis 22:2 records God saying something incomprehensible. "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and sacrifice him as a burnt offering." This wasn't random. God was testing what He planned to trust Abraham with. Would Abraham hold the promise tighter than the promise giver? Would he obey even when obedience made no sense? The test revealed Abraham's heart, not to God, who already knew, but to Abraham himself. Verse 12 records God saying, "Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Job faced a different test. Satan argued that Job only served God because God blessed him. So God allowed everything to be stripped away Job lost his wealth, his children, his health. His wife told him to curse God and die. But Job 13:15 captures his response. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. The test proved Job's faith wasn't dependent on blessings. It was anchored in God's character. And when the test was over, Job 42:12 records, "The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part." God doubled everything Job had lost. Behind the scenes, God is testing what he plans to trust you with. That financial pressure isn't punishment. It's testing your stewardship before he gives you more. That betrayal isn't random. It's testing your forgiveness before he gives you influence over people. That delay isn't denial. It's testing your patience before he gives you the promise. The intensity of the test reveals the magnitude of what God is preparing for you. Pass the test, and the promotion is already prepared. God is positioning you for divine connections. Ruth was a Moabite widow with no future. When her husband died, the logical choice was to return to her people. But she clung to Naomi and chose to follow her back to Bethlehem. She had no plan, no prospects, no idea what would happen. She just knew she needed to be in the place God was leading her. And Ruth 2:3 records what happened next. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. As it turned out. That phrase is packed with divine positioning. Ruth didn't strategically choose Boaz's field. She didn't network her way into his presence. She was just gleaning to survive. But behind the scenes, God had been positioning her. Every step that brought her from Moab to Bethlehem, every choice that led her to that specific field on that specific day, God was orchestrating connections Ruth couldn't see. She thought she was just gathering grain. She didn't know she was being positioned to meet her kinsman redeemer, marry into the lineage of David, and become part of the ancestry of Jesus Christ. Esther had a similar experience. She was an orphan, a Jewish girl in a Persian empire. When the king needed a new queen, Esther was taken into the palace with hundreds of other women. Humanly speaking, her odds were terrible. But Esther 2:17 records, "Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen." Why? Because God was positioning her. Esther 4:14 would later reveal the purpose. "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" She wasn't queen by accident. She was positioned to save her people from genocide. Every closed door, every confusing circumstance, every moment that seemed random, God was positioning her for purpose. The Apostle Paul experienced this in Acts 16. They planned to preach in Asia, but verse 6 says, they were kept by the Holy Spirit from preaching the word in the province of Asia. They tried to enter Bithynia, but verse 7 says, the Spirit of Jesus would not allow them to. Closed door after closed door, until they ended up in Macedonia, where they met Lydia, planted churches, and changed history. The closed doors weren't rejection, they were redirection. Behind the scenes right now, God is moving people, shifting circumstances, closing doors to redirect you, opening doors to position you. That job you didn't want but had to take? You're being positioned to meet someone crucial there. That city you don't like living in? There's a divine connection waiting there. Trust His positioning even when it looks like rejection. If this message encouraged you, like and subscribe for more truth. God is working behind the scenes even when you can't see it. Trust Him.